Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the collective. Now, I have
Ooh,
it sounded pretty good, clean.
dude,
Nice. Okay. Well,
so
then,
stable, as stable
stable.
as it's ever been,
I think it's probably the intro. Then I might
I
have to
think.
replay that issue, get that sorted out. While I am trying to figure all of these things out, what you should be doing is hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, and all that great stuff. Now, today
Dude, it's
it
so
is.
refreshing. I feel like my brain is getting a shower right now.
It's like minty fresh.
It's so minty fresh.
Freshness. Irish Springs. Here we go. Uh, now it's no longer June, so we're gonna be free flowing for a couple of days, getting it back into getting back into the real of
Routine?
things, routine of things, I guess, of just free flowing and hanging out. I do have some topics though. If anybody else has any comments or questions, do put them in the comment or question box. That way we can bring them up and talk about them, discuss them, all that good stuff. But before we get into any of my topics, do you guys have any thoughts? Anything off the top of your head that's percolating, perhaps?
I did mention that over here we start nicknaming people, and I was trying to figure out what Matt's nickname was. I was going with semi-regular Matt on Sundays, or would it be Sunday semi-regular Matt day, or like coming up with all of the variations on a theme of because I did state that it's only been 3 or 4 weeks now that we all shrugged our shoulders and said, "Hey, man, you'd be a good regular. Would you like Sunday? Can you be here every Sunday? That'd be really awesome." And just through a little shoulder shrug, we all said, "Yeah, why not?" And now it's regular Matt Sunday Matt. I mean, we got to come up with a better nickname than that.
Every second Sunday, Matt.
Well, it's one Sunday. One Sunday, I was in the mountains. Had no reception.
Nah,
That's
we. I'm teasing, of course, and my main point is this: I appreciate your commitment to being here on the Sundays, Matt. I do like a little bit of rhythm. I do like a little bit of
Routine.
something to look forward to. The consistency of, okay, Seb, it's days of Leroy on Monday, it's days of Matt on Sunday, or what have you. It's like a little milestone that you can kind of connect with on a weekly basis and just get a sense of kind of consistency, as it were. June was wild. So
it
it's
was a
nice
wild
to be
month.
able to get
Yeah,
back to a little bit of predictability, even in the unpredictableness of live chatting, of course.
for sure. You know what? His last name is Venerp. So we could do like the OK Corral Sunday or something like that, and he could just be here.
We'll have to come up. We'll play with it.
We will play with it and come up with something. So, but other than that, any thoughts or questions or anything off the top of your guys' head? Because
Now, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but you probably heard me bring up. Well, no, you might not have heard me bring up the conversation about sportsmanship, where I was talking about having to cleat stomp someone who kept soccer sliding me.
I didn't hear the conversation, but I read the post.
Okay, fair enough. So we don't have to talk about that, or the June. We could talk about what we've just come out of and how beneficial that was for everyone. But how I definitely need to decompress after June. So we can talk about that, or anything else that's interesting to you guys that isn't on the list of topics right now. Or
I like the decompression piece. Let's dive into that a little bit, and then also I was thinking, the topic of sportsmanship really goes into interpersonal relationships and like how you manage those and all those things. So I think that could tie in kind of nicely into, decompressing and how to deal with people, especially, and de-escalating, when you're that kind of rhythm. So let's dive into that then.
Yeah, sure.
How do you feel that June went? Let's start with that, because I think we knocked it out of the park, but it was challenging.
It was heavy.
Yeah, it was very heavy.
Right?
There were some topics that I'm glad I wasn't a part of, because it would have been hit the soul pretty hard. But I think we did a good job. I think the entire team, the collective, I think we crushed it for June. And like looking just on other social medias and stuff, there's not that much awareness for men's mental health. Halfway through the month, I did see some Instagram posts coming up stating, like, separate from you guys, but like stating, men's awareness month and how many people are sharing this. And I was tracking the ratios, and it's still very, very quiet around the communities.
Yeah, it's I agree with you, Matt. And one thing, of course, a part of this sort of kicked off with that whole park like a dad hashtag that just kind of really got under my skin.
I started parking like a dad and walked like an extra 200 meters because that's what I do.
Bro.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was kind of, that to me was the perfect representation of how lame it has been done up till now. Almost not even a half-assed attempt at the important topics of men's mental health. It wasn't even half-assed. It was a
I know what you're thinking of. Yeah.
Anyway, it was so thoroughly disappointing that June was to counter that lameness.
Yeah. And we stepped into it. We stepped into it hard too. That was the nice thing about it. It wasn't even like, oh, we'll just kind of dabble about it. I really did like the fact Seb brought up the point at one point was he was the one that gave me all the topics, the list of the heavy topics. And he was like, if we're going to talk about this, we should actually talk about this rather than just, you know, brief overview of what men's mental health is like. Well, no, let's hit the actual pieces of it, break it down into smaller things, and then take bites out of it. And I think that's what we did. I don't think that's what we did. That's exactly what we did. And I'm better for it. I know, like the amount of information that I have intaken into this thing is why my forehead is so big, right? Like, just it all collects right up in here.
We should talk about that because we've had a little offline discussion, Seb and I, and what we feel is you should take a few months off of the collective, because if your forehead gets any bigger, you'll have to go wide angle on your camera lens.
I have to turn it vertically so it will go.
I mean, you are doing
go from landscape to portrait.
You just like put a hole in the ceiling. You're good.
And in today's The Collective, we are going to go with the satellite view down Chance Burles.
I'm hoping that maybe one day, when I put some extra weight into my chest and
when
neck
you improve
region,
your spoon chest.
my head will like expand a little bit this way rather than all this, right? We'll see what happens.
You need to get on one of those. Joe Rogan was mentioned a couple of times in my live IG chat today, which is crazy. But we won't get into that. We are not going to get into that. But I did think of Joe Rogan. As you said, you need to expand your head, which I agree with. Of course, he's shilling the little bite down mouthpiece, the little rubber mouthpiece, in order to increase your jaw muscles.
Yeah.
So maybe you could hit up Joe.
I should just give him a call. I'll
drop him a line.
I'll drop him a line right now.
Yeah, next Sunday. Bring him on next Sunday. We can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it all together.
Semi-regular Matt, regular Joe.
Oh, I love this. Dr. C is in the house. Good to see anybody. He says you did a great job in June, and it's been interesting to see some people using AI as a substitute for human interaction, usually individuals that lack interpersonal skills. That is a great point too. And I think this has happened quite a bit throughout Men's Mental Health Month, is that there's this kind of a, I guess, more of a correlation between more people using ChatGPT or using AI to do things that instead of just doing them, if that makes any sense. So Damien was talking, I was talking to Damien at one point about using the AI art for the posts, the daily stuff, right? And he's like, yeah, I mean, it's cool and it's neat, but I mean, it's just stealing art from the internet, right? You're taking bits and pieces of art from all the other artists who are actually doing the work, who have actually put it up online, who've done all the drawings, and then it's just...
I disagree.
Okay. What do you got?
So I don't disagree with Damien's stance. I disagree at a higher level. So I'm going to call it an overarching theme on this one. I disagree that anyone's stealing anything. So I'm just going to ask you guys, and it should come to clarity pretty quickly here. You know, when you first started learning the English language, were you stealing words? So when you started forming sentences, were you stealing sentences? When you wrote your first book, did you steal those book ideas from someone else? where does original thought come from? You're taught it, but then you have to be creative and crafty and adventurous and thoughtful and contemplative and all of these things in order to write well. So I'm going to use myself as the example. Today, the post that I put out was all me out on the back deck, sweating in the vitamin D and literally sweating as I wrote. And it took me a long time to write that post because one of the limitations of Instagram is the amount of words that you can put in a post.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I've got a lot of thoughts on the subject that I was trying to put across. I could have written a book about that subject easily. With enough time, that would be a book. But I don't have a book space. I've only got an Instagram space. So I had to write until I'd run out of words. And then I had to go back and apply Occam's razor in order to add more clarity to my thoughts, in order to try to put the point across while still telling a story that was completely my story, not any interaction with ChatGPT 4.0. It's hard graft. It's hard work to write reasonably well on a topic. It's incredibly easy to write well using ChatGPT 4.0, which I have started to incorporate into some of my research patterns and my thought processes and how I write some posts in the past. But I don't use it as a hack. It's not a cheat for me. What it does is it adds a richer layer to the tapestry, if you will. So the writing that I did today was my own personal observation of my own writing skills, irrespective of any other outside influences. Tomorrow, if I write anything, I will probably incorporate a little bit of ChatGPT 4.0 to drive my mind in a more expansive way and see if I can keep up with ChatGPT 4.0, if you will. So I don't think anyone who's using ChatGPT 4.0 to write well is bad if they have been previously capable of writing well. I just use it as an additional powerful tool. I don't use it as a shortcut. I'm not in grade 6 trying to write a thesis using ChatGPT 4.0 with no personal sweat. So I think that obviously AI is going to change our worlds. It already has. And it's, listen, if anyone out there is listening to this and thinking, oh, big deal, AI, hang on for the ride, because if you're not paying attention, your world has already changed. It's just a matter of how fast you can try to keep up to it. So I think the writing aspect is a really important subject.
See, my argument with that, Shaun, I gotta start off your first point about how stealing words from individual languages and stuff, right? Those are words, individual pieces, right? But when you string them together to make a sentence or making like your own post, right? That's your post. You are stringing your thoughts together with said words. Now, if I went on there and grabbed 16 lines from you, 16 lines from someone else, and made a story about falling out of airplanes and then called it my own, is that theft? Is that stealing? Or am I making something brand new based on other people's experiences and just paraphrasing everything together?
I don't think so, because what you're doing is as I hear you right now, this is how I interpret it. Matt is going out there and he's cherry picking good stuff to create his own good stuff that I'm going to freaking learn from. Now, the difference is if you go out and cherry pick without thought and craft together something without thought, and then start waving the flag of look at me as an awesome writer. Yeah, I'm not into that. Okay. But if you cherry pick well, craft it together and put out something amazing, like I'm going to give you a nod for sure.
Okay. So that being said, with artificial intelligence, are they intelligent enough to actually make something good, or are they just cherry picking, throwing something together that is grammatically correct?
Yeah, so that's the thing with ChatGPT 4.0. It goes back to which Matt are we talking about as he cherry picks wisdom or cherry picks writing. If it's the shortcutter Matt who is applying no Mattisms to it, then that guy sucks. But if it's Matt who's thoughtful and crafting things together, I'm a fan. So now we talk about AI. What AI does, AI and Matt together, if Matt just types in craft me the best samurai thesis in the world, enter. And then if you just take that and go, well, that's obviously it, and you post that up and say, that's Matt's thoughts, That's not how I use AI. That's not how anyone should use AI.
Mhm.
What I do is, just to my earlier point, is I will craft things as a combination. So anything that I do with Chat GPT 4.0 is iterative. So sometimes I'll iterate it 10, 12, 30 times in order to get a clearer definition of what my human brain is seeking in order to make my point as not a novel point, but as a novel point for me. In conjunction with ChatGPT 4.0, it is it's a work of, not a work of art, but it's a work of it's a process that I have to go through that requires time and iteration. Sometimes I'll spend half an hour with ChatGPT 4.0, really pushing the envelope of my understanding, kind of like intergalactic understanding sometimes on a subject that I thought I knew pretty well. But you can dive really, really deep iteratively with ChatGPT 4.0. And then I do believe it then becomes your content, if you will.
Mhm. Yeah.
Becomes your own
And that's the same
creative
with
works,
art.
right?
If you put a question into ChatGPT 4.0, create the best samurai armor poster in the world, it's not a one and done. You've got to iterate that. So with Damien and the art that he created, that wasn't a 3-second art piece. That was, I would suggest, very iterative until it got to a point where the human and the machine had iterated it to a point where the human was pleased with the human machine interface learning trajectory. And now he can lay claim to, I'm pleased with my art, because it is his art.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was getting the thought process of it's a tool, right? Just like any other tool, it can be used well or it can be used not well. And I was thinking that when you really dive into, say, carpentry, and you want to start talking about really fine carpentry, the you're talking halves of millimeters in terms of tolerances for things to fit together. Like, these things are really tight, extreme precision. And you can use tools, you can use hand tools to do that. It just takes more time. Or you can use the power tools. It just takes less time. But if you don't know how to use them, you're not going to come up with the same level of craftsmanship that somebody that does know how to use them, which takes practice, takes iteration, right? You have to try to use the table saw once and have it throw the piece of wood back in your face before you go, oh, I need to hold it down. Maybe I should hold it down. Okay. And then work your way through that, or pick up a handsaw and try and figure it out that way. And I think the AI system is, if we utilize it as a tool within a siloed realm, then it's effective, rather than just kind of like throwing AI at a problem and hoping that it works.
I think that's a very
That
good
makes
point.
work.
That is it.
Yeah.
But I agree with all of that. I'm not pushing back in my next statement here. I'm just trying to build off it.
Yeah.
And so, using the woodwork example, like, if I'm showing up to your house to do something with wood, good luck, because I'm going to create a mess and it's going to look terrible. Like, if I'm there to build a chair for you, don't expect to be sitting down safely anytime soon, because I'm terrible at woodwork. But the difference between myself and a Red Seal carpenter is that same individual can show up at your house at the same time as I do, and in a shorter period of time can create a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's use Damien as the example. If Damien wasn't a longtime tattoo artist, he wouldn't just be able to rumble into AI and in a half an hour kick out what he kicked out.
Yeah.
That's craftsman work.
Mm-hmm.
That is the human machine learning interface at its best. A craftsman with a curious mind that is kicking out what I believe to be amazing art.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he was a layman, if he had no artistic streak, or he had no artistic mind, or he wasn't curious enough to iterate to put out something good, then we could easily make the conversation that AI sucks and AI is the devil and AI is going to ruin humanity. But I just don't believe that. If it's used well, it's probably the biggest thing to come along since the Gutenberg press.
That's high praise.
Mhm.
I've used it enough to believe that, though.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, I got a couple comments here. You got any thoughts, Matt, before we jump into those?
No, go, man.
Okay. So Doxy says, I agree with Shaun. Reminds me of the Hegelian principle. Thesis plus antithesis equals synthesis. Oh, yeah, no, that's good. I've never even heard of the Hegelian. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Could be Hegelian. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, that makes perfect sense. You're going to take something, add something else, and you're going to create a synthesis of it for sure. Salty Jinx says AI tools are great tools, but you're right in that it depends on the individual's ability to complete the intended task. Writing is a great example, as there are different forms for writing form. That's a great point. Social media to thesis to white papers to literature, and very few people focus on technical writing as opposed to flowery words. That is a great point. Yeah. And I can see that a lot too, because if you're going to utilize it correctly, especially AI, you need to be able to know how you want to write and what's the purpose of what it is you're writing. And what, like, I'm going to go back to the carpentry thing, is that if you want to build a chair, you have to know the basics of how a chair works before you start building one. Because if you don't, then you might come up with a stool or a table or something else, but it won't be a chair. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and so that is true. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll end up with whatever you end up with without probably much thought. And so, but with Chat GPT 4.0, you need to understand how to speak its language. You have to understand the correct prompts. You have to think like a machine to some degree. And I have great success with that, not because I'm a machine, though I have been accused of it. It's because I've been in computer system engineering for a long time. And I think like that to some degree. I kind of think like a machine because I've been working with machines for so long. And so in about 12 seconds, I can usually have an answer to anything. But then I have to iterate it or refine it to a point where I feel it's worthy of my interest. But ChatGPT is quick. And so the Hegelian aspect refers to something related to or influenced by the philosophical system of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, a German philosopher who lived in the 19th century. His philosophy, often referred to as Hegelianism, is a complex and comprehensive philosophical framework that explores various aspects of reality, knowledge, history, and human consciousness, which I quite like. So one of the central ideas of Hegelian philosophy is the concept of dialectics, which involves the interplay of opposing forces and ideas, the dialectic process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, yada, yada, yada. It goes on, and we could probably spend the rest of the podcast talking about it. But I agree with Doc to some degree that the Hegelian approach is it's what I said yesterday. But I use different language. What I'd said to you and Seb is, man, sometimes I really screw up conversations over here because I'm adventurous and I'm curious, and sometimes I get a little too intellectual, and sometimes I bump up against the edge of the racetrack and fly off it because I'm on the razor thin edge of performance, trying to push the conversation too hard. And what I did say yesterday to the Hegelian philosophy is, man, sometimes I try to counter my own thoughts in order to promote or provoke or entice someone else in the panel to come at it in a direction that either I agree with or don't disagree with or whatever. I'm just trying to move the needle in creative ways, and sometimes I do it poorly. But I'm not opposed to countering myself in order to draw the conversation out further.
Yeah. And you're actually quite good at this, and it's been quite helpful for a lot of the conversations, in the fact that not only do you push the boundaries of your own conversational abilities, but you're pushing the boundaries for everybody else, so that we all have to pick up the pace, basically, for lack of a better term. But
we all do, yeah.
And I think that is something that we should strive for in everyday conversations. Like, it shouldn't just be for the podcast that we all should, okay, now we're going to put on our talking hats and we're all going to have a good conversation. This is how we talk. Like Shaun
Well,
and
this
I,
is how people used to talk,
Yeah,
and this is how
exactly.
we now talk. That's right.
I was talking about the crew, the collective here. This is how we talk,
Right.
just in general. But you're right in that it is not something that people do en masse.
Well, let me ask you guys. I mean, I'll ask you, Chance, first, since you're deepest into it. Over here, having to kind of like elevate your speech, elevate your thought processes, be more intellectual, etc. I'm not saying that you were incapable of it before, that you weren't doing it well. What I am saying is you've had to elevate, just like I've had to elevate. And so, do you find yourself out there on the sidewalk or in a store or wherever? Do you find yourself like communicating differently now?
Absolutely. I used the word elocution.
Yes, you did.
Like just recently, and
it was fantastic.
It was very well. It was good for the conversation. But the funny thing is that I've found that my vocabulary has expanded because I've forced it to expand. That's at a bare minimum. That was one of the first things that happened that I noticed was I had to stop swearing for the show, but that made me stop. I just stopped swearing outside the show because it became such a process. Because if I was swearing a lot outside the show, I'd have to work harder during the show, right? And then on top of that, the vocabulary expanded. But not only did the vocabulary expand, I had to work on my elocution. I had to work on my tone. I had to work on all of these little things that most people don't think about in a conversation, so that I don't mumble or make the same mistakes over and over again, or sit and go or say actually all the time. It's forcing me to think on how I'm speaking, what it is I'm saying that is getting, in order to get the point across that I want to get across. Because initially, when we first started, I would speak and I would expect, like everybody else, to kind of get what I'm talking about. And through enough pushback and through enough people going, I don't really know what you're saying, it's forced me to raise my game. And I have to now be able to get my point across clearly, effectively, with an amount of brevity as well, so I don't just take over the podcast. So
it's really good, man. It's so much fun to watch how much better you are, not just in front of a microphone. I mean, when we go into the green room, previously when we went to the green room, we weren't being recorded, or we just like openly chat back and forth, and the tone changes, the language changes, the communication style changes. But over here in the non-green room conversations, everyone's to some degree minding their P's and Q's, and you have to get better. The moment that you want to drop that swear word, you've got to rapidly replace it with something that is novel, which is like, it's neuroplasticity, baby. You're having to hardwired neural pathways that would normally have you dropping an F-bomb. And it's the challenge of not dropping F-bombs is enough to force change in the way someone thinks. And then once that picks up traction, once you start replacing words with words, now you're doing the word learning game. And it's fun once you start recognizing that you can speak relatively intelligently at a level that is impressive enough that people will sit up and pay attention, and then synchronize with what you're dropping down in front of them. They'll pick it up and start doing it themselves. And next thing you know, you're trying to keep up with them. That's what I see with you, Chance, right now in front of a microphone. You're doing it so well that I'm starting to think, oh, he's kind of passing me. We're in the game. We're in the game. You know, so the game of trying to keep up with people. Each boat raises. Now it's your job to get up to the same level as that boat that just raised.
Yeah, I like that. Matt, you got any thoughts?
I do talk to people, and I have conversations with others, right? And I do find that I do switch and use different vocabulary and different tones and expressions when I'm speaking to different people. So yeah, I agree with you guys. Whereas actually, there's a big positive change when it comes to presenting, teaching, coaching, as opposed to just having a conversation with people.
Yeah. The one of the things I noticed really quickly was the fact that how often do you have an hour-long conversation with somebody every day? Right? Not many people have an hour-long conversation with people all, let alone, and I'm talking like a full-out conversation where you are back and forth, you're listening and building and hitting back and kind of discussing things, not just, the everyday general speaking at each other rather than discussing things. And man, the way in which Shaun now can manage the microphone and utilize his distance and how he works the camera a little bit, and he can use his hands a little bit more than when he did at the beginning. It's really cool to see. And again, I said it yesterday when we were talking with Seb, was the fact that I don't think I've done something every day for 6 months straight that has been consistently evolving. Right, it's on an upward trajectory for 6 months like that. It has not slowed down. We have not leveled out. We haven't plateaued. We've just been, okay, let's keep going. We're going. And it's been upwardly mobile consistently every day. And it's been awesome.
So let me ask you a question. First word that comes to mind for you when you say that, what do you think?
You're going to have to rephrase that. what do
so
I
you
think?
Just listed off all of those things, all of the things that you just said. Think about what you just said and what word comes to mind about what you just said.
Evolution is the first word that came to my mind.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel?
It's awesome. It really is. I've noticed so many changes, not only in myself, but in...
Awesome is a different thing.
You're right.
You don't...
You're right.
So how does it make you feel?
It makes me feel proud.
Beautiful.
Of how far I've come and what I've accomplished, but not only that, how it's affecting the people around me.
So good.
And that's the big one I noticed the most, is that my boys, especially me and my wife, how we talk to each other, how we engage with each other, it's changed in the last 6 months, and it's become better and more effective and more, not so much blunt, but direct. Right? We're not beating around the bush. We're not looking to hurt each other's feelings. We're not looking to do all the normal standard ways of protecting yourself. It's not true vulnerability, but it's not an aggressive way to talk to each other anymore. It's kind of matter of fact. This is what's happening. This is how I'm feeling. How are you feeling about that? Oh, okay, that's great. Okay, now I know I can change. I can develop. I can... much more effective way of communicating.
A little less emotionally reactive and a little 100%. More thoughtful.
Yes, absolutely. Now I got... there's almost a conversation going on in the comments here, but are there any thoughts on... I'm good. I'm staying away from them right now. But I'm wondering, Matt, you got any thoughts on...
this was solid, dude. Like, seriously. Like, a lot of the things you're saying... Now, be more open to actually having a conversation. I love that. I love being able to have a conversation with people and actually talk, debate, and no one's getting hurt or emotions are like flying around. Like, oh, you don't agree with me. You're blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, man, I'm just like devil's advocate. Let's have this out, right? I love those kind of conversations, and it's something that's very missing around society right now, right? And especially, I think the kind of point was brought up in the comments. It was about like men don't normally have this conversation either. It's pretty much, you doing good, okay, fine, and then that's the conversation right there.
Yeah, and actually the other conversation that happened, and you're right, Matt. That is what we do as men typically is, how you doing? Good. See you later.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that does happen is someone will say, how you doing? Good. How you doing? Good. Hey, man, did you see that headline? Can you believe that Russia's invading us this afternoon?
Yeah.
And then the other guy just says, oh, I didn't know that. Cool. And off they go. Zero thought. That delivery of that doom and gloom message then gets proliferated around several thousand men who don't want to think. They just want to emotionally respond. And so they'll latch on to something that's going to make them angrier than they're already angry about. And they're just going to push that message without any critical analysis or any critical thought. And so the conversations that we're trying to have is, if someone says, hey, did you know that blah, 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 I'm going to look at them and say, no, I didn't know that. Where did you learn that? Or who passed that on to you? Or what's the basis of that? And I've got a few more questions for you. Why do you feel that way? Are you concerned that Russia's going to be on your front doorstep this afternoon? Like get to the meat and potatoes of why someone is mega angry and just wanting to spout off nonsense because they gave it zero thought before they started re-pushing the nonsense. And that is the lost art of communication. Simply taking someone else's idea and spitting out as if it was fact without any thought. That is what's tearing society down right now to some degree as well. And we just don't do that over here.
100%. I'm going to hit some comments unless, Matt, you got any thoughts on that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So there's some great ones here. And Dr. C says, colleges are missing out on the Hegelian principle because many don't look at a theory and opposing theories. And sometimes a new theory develops. What's interesting that I would think that this is part of the scientific process, isn't it not? Like, I believe this is going to happen, and then you test it. Oh, it didn't happen. Okay, now I got to come up with a new theory. Is that not the scientific process?
But we have, and just in case you haven't read any of the headlines over the last decade, we are moving away from science. So
that is a good point. Yeah, it's very true. He carries on. Podcasting definitely helps you organize your thoughts. And as Shaun said yesterday, it helps you practice to think quickly because it's live. And that's another thing I think we don't really take into account on a normal everyday conversation is the fact that it matters, right? The conversations that we have with people have become very
keyboard commando,
sure, or surface level, or social media, or you said it earlier, is that there's only so many characters you can use in a message, right? So it's created this, it's almost going too far with brevity, right? You're not saying enough. You're just saying stuff because it needs to be said, or it's that you feel like it needs to be said, but it's not actually developing that information. It goes to the headline concept too.
You're not saying anything if you're simply repeating what someone said to you and you gave it no thought. That is not thoughtful thought. That is just monkey mirroring, in my opinion.
Yeah. Matt?
Well, a lot of it is also that there's no engagement, and you're protected behind distant screen and lack of knowing the individual too. Like, we're sitting here, we're talking, we're having a conversation. I say something that Shaun doesn't 100% agree with. He's going to get on me 100% and challenge me to rethink that. But if you're social media and you're on your phone or computer or whatever, you send it, and then maybe 2 seconds later you get a response, maybe 5 months down the road, and you're like, well, my emotions for that was then, and it's no longer now. So I believe that because it is, our conversations now are so separated by time, distance, and literally the screen. I think that level of protection is a false security in the way that we actually present ourselves now there.
Yeah, 100%. Shaun, you got something?
I do, and I think that goes back to not being held accountable. I just said that just recently, that if I love it when someone passes me and I've now got to keep up to them. But what I don't love is when someone's standing at the sidelines, not in the game, and is yelling things like, "You suck." Guess what? As I'm continuing on my trajectory, I'm going to look to the sidelines and say, yeah, come and demonstrate it. Bring it. Prove it. I suck. Bring your awesomeness and let's see what's up. Oh, you're faster than me on a bike? Go get your bike. Let's go for a ride. Oh, you think you can ... Well, bring your ... and let's pressure test that theory. So all of the opinions out there from the folks on the sidelines who are not in the arena, I will always hold them accountable. I don't care. Even if it's only 10 seconds, I'll glance and say, well, bring it, you chump. And I'll keep on going. Whatever I've got to say to engage that person to help them understand one of two binary moments. One, they're going to bring it, or two, they're going to shut up. I don't want to hear you chirping from the sidelines about how you woulda, shoulda, coulda, and you will. Get in the game. Lace up your boots. Come stand next to me and see who can jump the furthest or run the furthest or whatever. If you want to pressure test me, don't do it with empty words. Show up with your running shoes on and be prepared to get your ass kicked. And if you kick my ass, well, thank you very much for opening my eyes as to how I can do it better. And then I'll be in the game with you.
Mhm.
I think the challenge in that is fear, right? That is one of the biggest deterrents for most people doing any of these things, is that it is fear. I know I was scared out of my mind to start podcasting in general. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I did not see the worth in myself. I didn't see the worth in my experience. I didn't see all these things, right? But the removal, not so much the removal of fear, the conquering, I guess, of fear, stepping over that fear and doing it anyway, is the difference between the people that actually do the work and those that sit on the sidelines and chirp. Because right, that chirping that's straight laziness. It's the same thing in utilizing swears into your conversation to the point that you're not actually saying anything. It's the same thing in having those conversations of like, hey man, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. I'm good. It's just laziness. It's not putting the work in. It's not putting the thought in. It's not taking the time to be intentional with what it is you're saying and doing, and then whining at somebody else because they are. Right? It makes you feel bad or something like that. It's silly. At least I'm looking back now at myself, 10 years ago, going
I did
like,
the same.
man, I mean, dumb.
We've all sucked in the past.
Yeah.
I still suck now, just a little less.
A little less, yeah. That's exactly it.
Don't suck at the same things in the past.
Yeah, that's true. Just the new things.
Just new things.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point in the fact that you'll never actually stop sucking as long as you're continually doing new things, right? I know, phrasing, right? But
probably mid-sip.
But
Happy Canada Day.
There you go, yeah. But it is kind of the point in that, and if you can let that go, if you can let the worry go of like, oh no, I'm going to suck at this. Like, I'm going to suck at this. I'm new at it. Cool. Let's bring it. Let's see what happens. You can climb faster.
I do love that. I do love the that adventurous spirit of the, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. But the problem is that you may fail, and not too many people are super keen on failing at these kind of things publicly in front of the internet. And so there is a barrier to entry. We're not talking about, hey man, have you ever talked to anyone at the water cooler? Maybe I'll see you there tomorrow afternoon. I mean, we're talking about freaking the whole world right now. Yeah. And so if you blow it here and live, it's way different than at the water cooler. But the difference between the two is orders of magnitude of benefit. So you're over there at the water cooler, everyone's whining about how no one got the crustless sandwiches for lunch. Same thing every day, the same groundhog moaning, whining, blah, 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 the water cooler. Nothing ever gets sorted out there. But over here, we're not talking about water cooler nonsense. And if we screw it up over here, okay, all right. But there's others that are watching us do what we do, and they should be encouraged that they too can have the guts to stand in front of a microphone and not talk about stupid water cooler stuff. Talk about things that matter, that their neighbors want to learn more about, that their friends want to know more about, that we can talk about and push the envelope so that someone out there thinks, those guys are idiots. What I would have said in front of the microphone is ... Well, good. Well, at least you're thinking now. Outside of the water cooler moment, So we have a responsibility to kind of push the envelope to some degree, but at the same time, we're supposed to be encouraging others to push their envelope as well. That's how I see as forward progressing, is not just our little team, but bringing in others to be part of the, okay, it's go time.
Yeah. And it's about ownership too. Because I think if you do screw up, you screw up, own it, and keep on going, learn from it, and don't make that mistake again. Don't say swear words, or don't, keep on topic, and, don't talk about Sean's shirt or anything like that. And then you just keep on going on with, you just, learn from it, right? I think that's a lot of the problem too, is that people don't want to have that ownership of things that they have said or done that are wrong. And they just get all fearful about it too. And just, make a new account and start over again. Well, own it, and then learn from it, and then correct it. And then when someone sees that you sucked in the past and how you are now, I mean, that is such a growth and so empowering for multitude of people, not just for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do believe we said it yesterday. I know I said it for sure, very clearly, that if anyone's tracking what we're doing over here or anyone is getting what I'm trying to put down, you should be able to see that on January 1st, I was dumber than I am right now. I was not as good as I am right now at life. I've learned so much over the last 6 months. And it's not that I was a slacker on January 1. I just wasn't as evolved as I am right now. Well, we're all slackers in context of today, but I'm just saying I wasn't a slacker.
Oh yeah, no, I know you weren't. I'm saying I was. Like,
well, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but the point is that if anyone is paying attention, if you can invest in a daily episode over here, you are going to be better for it. If the alternative is this, go spend $10,000 of your money, waste it on a weekend getaway where you learn nothing at a retreat that's called Enter into Your Own Inner Power or whatever, some goofy title where there's lots of crustless sandwiches and all the coffee you can drink, but you're bored to tears because you're not learning anything novel. There's nothing in it that is really speaking to your soul. It's all water cooler conversations. And don't spend $1. Just jump in here every day for an hour. And then at the end of a month, after a solid 30 days, take that $10,000 and invest it wisely in something else.
Yeah. I think that's it really goes to the point of it, what do you do with an hour? Like what can you do with an hour every day? Because you can do friggin' anything you want. If you were to put an hour into something every day, you can really basically do anything. And if you're spending an hour watching the Kardashians or watching some random show on Netflix or whatever, that's not helping you in any way, or it's not gaining you anything, sit down, listen to us. Like, give it a week and go, I wonder if I've gained anything in 7 days over the last 7 hours of my life that I've spent. And I'm going to say 99.9% guarantee you that you're going to level up if you put some work into it. If you put the effort into sitting there and listening for an hour every day for a week, you're going to learn something poignant, not just learn something.
Well, you are, but in your learning, you're actually teaching those around you that you can now commit to something. If you can do 7 days in a row over here or 30 days in a row, you're demonstrating leadership by example all of a sudden. If you were a slacker and inconsistent and little peaks and valleys of I just want to watch Netflix today, maybe tomorrow I'll do something with my life. Well, if you can just get in the game of consistent attempt to improve yourself 30 days in a row over here, you will be better. That's a money back guarantee. And by money back guarantee, I mean, you ain't paying us anything, so you ain't getting any money back. But it's a money back guarantee. And more importantly, and this is way more important than you out there listening, it's the people around you that are seeing you engage in life and try to be better. Through them seeing that, it should entice or encourage them to want to do better. It raises your tiny little team in whatever part of the world that you're in, listening to 30 days of us in a row. People will pick up what you're putting down. And next thing you know, little teams, little A teams spreading all over the nation, all over the world. That's my hope.
Persistence is always the key, honestly. Like, you have to keep on doing the same thing, right? Small little story. So just slacking off, right? This morning I decided to sleep in, right? So I slept in.
Nice.
Right? Did a little extra hour, right? I got up, grabbed some coffee, and did something completely out of routine. Just
nice.
Not the same thing. Screwed me up because for the last 4 or 5 months, I've been doing, I get up, washroom, workout, turn on coffee, shower, food, study, go to work, right? So that screwed me up completely. So I actually ended up going back to bed, do a quick mental reset, do my affirmations, do my pre-planning for the day, get up, make my bed, start the workout, start my coffee, again, second coffee, and got back into that routine. It was a couple hours later in the normal routine, but it's because it was so persistent. That was my morning program, and that actually making me having a good day, right? Long story short, persistence, keep on doing what works for you, what goes good, and then you'll learn and learn, evolve, grow, develop, and succeed.
Except I think what you did was awesome, because I consider that to be a pattern interrupt.
I figured
I
you were
agree
gonna go
too.
there.
Like if you're on the Olympic trajectory and every day is as a programmed awesome day that is making you 1% better every day, and that's guaranteed. If you've got an amazing coach that's got you on an amazing trajectory, well, that's fantastic. But I can assure you that I've had athletes on those trajectories. And right when I know that everything is perfect, I flip flop their world, because that's a pattern interrupt. And you know what? It stings a little bit. Short term, it's a bit discombobulating. They might even backslide a touch, and that's frustrating for them. And if I can't explain it to them in a way that will help them move through that process without me getting all coachy McCoachy and talking about all of the weird theories that I've observed over the years, I just say this: that's called a pattern interrupt. Get with the program.
Yeah, agreed.
And if they need more than that, I'll build it out. But I will never, ever sit down and spend the rest of the day encouraging someone to engage in a pattern interrupt because they don't want to. They're either in the game or they're not. And I think pattern interrupts are critical. The people that I've explained a lot of my deeper theories to are people that I've passed those torches onto with the expectation that they're going to take my wisdom, experience, knowledge, all of that good stuff, refine it so that it's awesome for them when they're working with their people. I'll use Julie Kelly as the example. I taught her how to do certain things that she doesn't even know I taught her to do. And it doesn't matter if she knows it or not. She just does awesome freaking work. And she's continuing on the ideas that I had when I was a high performance coach. And I know she'll do a better job because my time was done. Her time is now. The reality is that there's a whole bunch of tips, tricks, and tools out there in order to create new patterns for a person that if they were on the perfect trajectory to the Olympics, that's not enough for me. I want them also to be an awesome human and an awesome Olympian. So it requires some pattern interrupts.
Matt, you got thoughts on that?
No, just that I agree with you 100%. Like we did it in the Army during training. Chance, you can say this too. The whole like total shift in routine or totally making something chaotic. So it's not the same pattern over and over and again. It's not a program response. And like today I learned that I really like my program and I should really stick with it. But it was a good interruption for me to learn from that too.
Yeah, I agree. You know, what it forced you to do was reflect on what you've not been taking for granted, but with what you like at the moment. And sometimes we've got to dislike certain things in order to contextualize what we do like.
Growth.
You got to be able to see the difference between what you've normalized and what you haven't. And that I think is a big one. I actually have a funny little story from back in the day in high school. Back in the day, high school, yeah.
So I was like, in what, 2 years ago? What was
that? With this gone, yes, it was 2 years ago.
Glad you picked it up.
Yeah. So I was in metal shop, and we were doing it's all metal work, right? So you're doing tin bashing, you're doing welding, you're doing all these great things. But at the beginning of the course, the very first project we had to do was called a finger box. And we were, what a finger box, like what is this? And it's a very basic small tin, kind of like an ashtray, but maybe 3 inches by 3 inches. Very simple build, using basics of hand tools, and you're good to go. So we all build these little finger boxes and we present them to the teacher, and he's like, okay, good. Now we're gonna put your names on them. And so we, hit it with a little plasma welder to cut our names in it, made it all special, and it was ours. And then we lined them up on the chalkboard, and he goes, okay, so now this is the reason we have these. And we're like, yeah, anybody that cuts your finger off, you have a box. It goes in your box and it goes to the hospital with you with your name on it. And we were all like, what? What do you mean cut our finger? And he's like, it happens every year. Somebody cuts their finger off every year. That's why everyone has a box. Everybody's gone home with a box. If you're here next year, you'll have that same box. Don't worry about it. It's all good. And there were the grade 11s and the grade 12s. And like, we were all sitting there just like, we're all going to cut our fingers off? Oh my God. You have never seen so many grade 10ers be so careful around heavy machinery before in their life, because it was thrown in their face at the very beginning. You will cut your finger off. Nobody cut their finger off though. And for years, the same teacher had been there, and he made everybody make a finger box right off the bat. Because when he was in school, he told us the story later when I graduated. He was like, when I was in school, I cut my finger off, and there was no boxes. There was nothing to carry it. Like, he had to pick it up off the floor and take it to the nurse's office, right? Who then they called an ambulance. Who went to
The finger
had it
coffin
reattached,
box.
right? And so he was like, well, I'm never going to let somebody else's finger sit on the floor, have to have them sit in their school office holding their finger in one hand with a nub on the other. It's just like, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. But as we were talking, I realized that this is what it applies to across the board, is that if in conversation, in routine, in all of these things, if you front load what, some of the issues that you might run into, you're going to work extra hard not to run into those issues, right? The finger box it's your little sticky note of the It's the pattern interrupt this morning and going, oh, that didn't feel right. I gotta restart this. And so this story popped in my head as we were talking, but I think it's applicable. Build yourself a finger box. Be ready for it.
I wonder if John Wick had a finger box. What do you think?
I don't think he did. At least it wasn't in the movie.
It wasn't in the movie.
Now we're getting a little close on time, but I got a bunch of comments here.
Hit him, buddy.
For this
Hit
conversation.
him.
Okay,
Bang him out. I know semi-regular Matt likes the comments, so
I do.
Comments,
yeah.
And I can't see any of them, so it's always a little bit of a Christmas surprise for me.
Surprise for you. It's awesome. Okay, so here we go. I gotta go back into some of these things here. So Satch says, I'm saying if it's a good thing. I'm saying if it's a good thing or not. But having said that, I have noticed that I don't really engage with people on a superficial level anymore. How about y'all? Which is a great question, because that's, as to what we were talking about earlier. Salty Jinx says, Doxy, I think it goes farther than just colleges. The college ofs. I see biases for growth in multiple professions on professional thought and analysis these days across many different environments. That makes a lot of sense, because technical schools, I guess, as well as universities and colleges and all those, I think would probably suffer from the same issue.
Well, it's not just that; it's all of society.
Yeah.
And so, and perfect point by Doxy. This morning he added me. I think he added you, Chance. He added Seb, and I forget who
and
else.
The collective.
Right, and then it was in reference to that if you don't have any muscle mass, if you're not doing any form of strength training, then the average cost is about $3 billion a year for people who have no strength. And that's got nothing to do with their level of other issues that they're facing. And so it's a great headline in that article over on PubMed. But as I read, I thought, I want to see who came to 3 billion and how. And so I did a little bit of digging, and I think that the number, though it may be correct, 3 bill, how it came to be, how the number was created, I think is a bit disingenuous, because it references a couple of big silos. One is diabetes, and the other one is cardiovascular disease. And there's already been amounts allocated to that, about $1 billion each. And so all of these things to say that someone has made a loose reference to already pre-existing diseases, and if you don't work out, it's kind of being coattailed onto that. But that is, as I see it, that was I'll call it at best a sloppy scientific reference. But what I do believe is that someone who isn't working out like that, irrespective of obesity or diabetes or any of these things, the simple fact that they're in the game. Now, psychologically and emotionally, they're more comfortable with adversity. The hormonal releases created by exercise, dopamine, and etc., and the sense of self-worth, and carrying yourself down a sidewalk with your shoulders a little further back, your chin up, and not being so self-conscious, and etc. The psychological and emotional components of not working out, I feel, are more devastating than whether you're carrying an extra 5 pounds of muscle on you and etc. So I think that critical thought is sorely lacking in society right now. I know Doc C is good to go, but when he says something, I just don't sit back, put my feet up and think, well, Doc C said it. It's legit. It's so factual that I'm just going to repeat it. Doc C's thought then becomes my thought, but that's not how I think. Doc C's thought makes me think, and then my thought will be my thought. And it won't be just a simple repetition of Doc C's thought. So that to me is the critical aspect of what he's talking about. It doesn't matter whether it's a university or you're leaning against a wall in front of a bakery. If someone says something dumb and you know through critical thought that it's dumb, it's your responsibility to say something either politely or not along the lines of, how did you come to that conclusion?
100%. So continuing on, which I don't think we need to build that
if
out.
you guys have got
was,
anything to add,
that was crystal clear. That
Okay.
that was exactly. I was just trying to think of how I could segue that into the rest of the comments.
Check.
So Salty Jinx response to Satch from earlier. He says, Satch, yeah, since making my own changes, I have issues engaging with people, but it's not about avoidance these days like it was in the past. It's great insight for sure. Doc C says, Dr. Taylor is in the house. Most people don't catch when they are asked how they feel, and the person responds with a belief or statement. He also then asks, have you found that jiu-jitsu can lead to some elevated conversations after rolling? I have. I have as well, for sure.
And you know, so okay, maybe.
No, go ahead.
I mean, Doc C's fast with the fingers.
Oh yeah, he's
so
going.
He might have answered his own question already. What did he have going there?
He said, pattern interrupts are a solid technique for many years in life. It helps people deal with life's uncertainties.
So what I was going to ask you, Chance and Matt, if you have thoughts on this as well, maybe Doc C has some thoughts. Why do you think the conversation is the way it is after BJJ?
Well, I'm going to leave that to Matt because I'm not allowed to talk about BJJ today.
Oh, that's right. Well, you've got a waiver on this one.
Yeah, no, you got a waiver, buddy.
Okay. I really believe that it has to do with the fact that it requires a higher order thinking to play BJJ at a higher level. So it's not superficial of just, this is the move.
But what if you're a day 2 white belt? Because the Doc C's comment, I think, can still stand in place for a day 2 white belt.
I think I would stay with say it requires a higher order of thinking because it requires you to be present in what happened right now, and that elevates the way in which you can think about the rest of life in general, because you are now thinking of what is happening, what is.
I don't agree with that.
No,
I don't think that occurs for any white belt until like they've been in the game maybe a year. I mean, their higher order of thinking is this: how do I even breathe? Oh yeah, I'm not breathing.
Oh yeah, I'm not breathing.
So I don't think there's much higher level of thought in respect to specifically BJJ as a noob. You're just not. You're just not. Yeah. What I do believe it is connection. First night on the mat, the moment that we connect physically, we're connecting spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Yeah. You get to feel me. You get to sense my vibe. If I'm really angry with you, I don't have to put the choke on you. You'll feel it the moment that I connect with you if you have a certain sensitivity. And there's some people who are really empathic or really sensitive to the synchronicity of the moment or the vibe of the moment. And there's others that absolutely are not. They're not aware of what's going on. But subconsciously or at a deeper level that they're not aware of, it's still happening, man. We're still vibing. Yeah. We're still connected. We're still having the feels that we're feeling in the moment. Even if you're a noob and you're completely unaware of what just happened, you were still connected to me. We were still connecting. And after the rolls, after the night is done and everyone's leaning against the wall sweating, the barriers are down. And that first nighter just connected with a human in a way that they've never connected before, perhaps. I feel that is it.
I agree. Matt, you got any thoughts on that?
No, not really. I'm just wondering if it has something to do with the oxytocin hormone feedback loop for physical connection, right? And since it is in a very positive and trusting manner, right? Because you're engaging, but you're also trusting the other person not to like render you, right? I wonder if that is a positive effect too as well that stimulates that trust and an open conversation after the fact.
Yeah,
just a thought.
I think that oxytocin is a big part of it. But when we strip out all of the fancy science names, I think it just comes down to
Human connection.
human
Yeah.
connection.
Agreed.
I think that's definitely better than my answer. That's for sure.
Your answer was good, buddy.
No, I was thinking you were right in order to push back on the fact that a brand new white belt's not going to be thinking on higher order level.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct in that it is a connection, and it is a trust thing. It's a vulnerability thing, and you're opening yourself up to possibility, and that conversation will flow physically at first, and then it'll flow verbally afterwards when everything calms down physically and you're able to open that verbal Pandora's box a little bit. And
I think your point was correct, but it's a little further down the evolutionary path. So,
sure.
As a first nighter, you don't know, you can't even spell jujitsu. Is it one word or two words? And so, you don't know anything, but you're getting the connection. You're feeling what you're feeling. Maybe you understand it, maybe you don't, whatever. But the connection has happened. A year or whatever down the road, maybe you're getting your blue belt. Well, now you can actually communicate with the first person who comes onto the mat. It's their first night. And what you're doing is higher order thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You're now able to string sentences together into a language and without speaking, explain it to that person who doesn't even know a word yet. So they're low order of thinking, but feeling. You've already felt, will still continue to feel, but now you have a language that you can pass down to that first night noob.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And this goes back to the water cooler concept, right? Is that once you spend 30 days here on the collective and you go back to your water cooler, oh man, talk about the conversations you could have there.
Oh, buddy, pattern interrupts all day long.
Exactly. All right, I got a bunch more here, but we're well over time now, so let's get some final thoughts, and then we'll shut her down for the day. But Matt, what do you got? Final thoughts on the art of conversation?
It's got to be engaged more. You get, we're so superficial in our conversations on the day-to-day basis with our work. I'm making this quick, right? Work buddies, school buddies, all that kind of stuff. You have to slow it down, the conversation, and actually start engaging with actual real thoughts and real meaning, and not just take things as superficial value.
100%. Shaun?
I agree with Matt.
I also agree with Matt. But, the one thing I do want to say at the very end here is build yourself a finger box. Front load some stuff. Well, no, honestly, front load some. If you think of getting into a conversation, there's some things that are like, oh, I don't know if I really want to talk about that. Research it. Have something to talk about. Give yourself an ability to front load some information so that you feel comfortable and confident in what you're going to be talking about. And I think that is a key proponent in life. And I'm going to be applying it into my own life because I had forgotten that story up until we started talking about it. So by all means, build yourself a finger box. So,
well, it's a weird way to end. It's a weird way to end the podcast. Other than this, what I do appreciate, because obviously, through your calculated approach in using the finger box to end the podcast, what you were really doing is planting the seed in other people's minds to think, what, they ended it with that? Now they can't get it out of the head for the rest of the day. And hopefully people will think a little bit deeper.
I think perhaps that maybe I am learning a thing or two from the master of planting seeds over there. And
I just don't want the seed in my head. The finger box.
Now you got it in there. Too bad, man. You're just going to have to deal with it. But as we learn how to build our own finger box, as we build that finger box, we can grow into people that are responsible and develop our conversations, develop ourselves every day, like you can do here on the collective with us. We'll see you all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.